Hey there everybody and welcome. Today I'm going to teach you how to play Tawantinsuyu, the Inca Empire, a new board game designed by Dávid Turczi, scheduled to be released sometime in October of this year, I believe. And I'm going to be teaching the game using a program that I wrote to play the game. This is a prototype program in the sense that I haven't actually seen all of the final tiles and cards and whatnot. Some of my images are blurry, a little blurry, but still usable. I'm familiar with a lot of the cards and building tiles and such, but to supplement those, I essentially designed some prototypes to follow the general pattern of cards and tiles in this game. Once I have seen the final release, be it on Tabletopia or elsewhere, then I'll clean this up and make it look shiny and new, and probably do a full 3-player playthrough. But today I'm just teaching the game. If you are not familiar with my channel or you subscribe to my channel, you'll see that I design programs for board games that I like, and probably have written and presented 70 plus programs and videos over the years, tutorials, playthroughs, solo playthroughs, whatnot. So if you're interested, please by all means subscribe to my channel, like the video, and all that. Before we get into the actual how you play the game portion of this video, let me talk a little bit about setup and what the results of setup are. First of all, I want to bring your attention to this Coricancha Wheel, this pentagonal tile that's in the center of the game board. You don't have to play with this tile because underneath it there's a pre-printed version of it on the board, but it's suggested that once you've played the games a couple times, feel free to mix things up a little bit and just randomly rotate this tile and put it in the middle of the game board to mix up how some of these spaces are aligned with the rest of the game board as it's designed. I think the pre-printed version has this space at the bottom, so it looks like my program has randomly rotated this Coricancha wheel by, I guess, what's that, 72 degrees clockwise. One notch to the right, essentially. There are 4 resources in the game: potatoes, corn, stone, and gold. Each player starts the game with 2 stone. Potatoes and corn are jointly referred to as food. Sometimes you'll have to pay potatoes for something, sometimes you'll have to pay corn. On other occasions, you'll have to just pay food, in which case you can choose whether to pay potatoes or corn. Potatoes tend to be more readily available, so I would say more often than not, when you're paying food, you're probably going to be using potatoes. Gold is also a wild resource and can fill in for any other resource, so I suppose if you're really short on food, you could always pay a gold, although that's probably not the most efficient and optimal use of your gold. The game comes with a total of 45 worker meeples, 9 meeples in each of 5 colors: yellow, which are called couriers; blue, architects; white, priests; red, warriors; and green, craftsmen. If you're playing a full 4-player game, you use all 45 of those meeples. But if you're playing a 3-player game, as I am today for demonstration purposes, you actually start with 7 of each color, so a total of 35 workers. And each player is dealt randomly 2 workers from the bag. Each player, aside from starting with 2 stone, also starts with 10 points, 10 victory points. And each player has in their possession a scoring marker, 5 step markers, and 10 conquest discs. And you'll see how each one of these items are used over the course of this video. I should point out right now that not only does each player start with 2 workers, but you'll see that a player cannot end his turn with more than 2 workers. If the player does end his turn with more than 2 workers, he has to discard down to 2. And those workers that are discarded are actually removed from the game. So you'll find that the workers in this game are a constantly dwindling resource because generally speaking, once they're placed on the board, they're going to stay there for the remainder of the game. In addition to the workers, there are two stacks of buildings. There's a stack of passive buildings and a stack of production buildings. You always reveal the top two passive buildings and the top two production buildings so that you create a building market that players can purchase tiles from. In addition to the building market, there is a deck of weaving tiles. That stack is 35 tiles deep. 4 of those tiles are starting tiles, and they're kept separate from the rest. And then many of the tiles are marked only for 4 players or only for 3 players. So I'm estimating that in a 3-player game, once you've taken out the 4 starting tiles, you're probably playing with it looks like what I have here, a stack of 26 weaving tiles. There's also a stack of army cards here. These are always face down. I'll talk more about those later on. There are a group of workers here called the Nomads. Worker count varies by player count, so in a 3-player game, you play with 5 Nomads drawn randomly from the bag. There's space here for 2 more if you're playing a 4-player game. And there is a village as well. When you need a worker from the Nomads, you just take whichever one you want. But if you were going to take a worker from the village, you have to take it either from the north end or the south end. The north end is the potato end, so to take this white worker from the village, you would have to pay 1 potato. To take this blue worker from the village, you'd have to pay 1 corn. I will talk more about the village later. It plays a very crucial role in the game in terms of determining how long the game is going to go, and that's very much controlled by the players. There are a group of statues up here. There's 2 small statues for each of the 6 god types. And there's 1 large statue for each of the 6 god types. So I should also point out there is a temple track here. Everybody starts at 0, a marker that shows how far they progressed up this temple track. I'll talk more about that later on as well. The board is a little bit overwhelming at first. There's a lot of icons here, but you can divide the icons into 2 different groups. There are those that have these odd-looking symbols on them. These are god symbols. There's a total of 6 different types of god symbols. And interspersed with those are task symbols. All of these spaces on the board that are marked with god symbols are worker placement spaces. This part of the board represents a mountain or a hill, and the Coricancha is the top of the hill, the peak. And then the hill or the mountain is divided into 3 layers or terraces. There's a top terrace of icons here, a middle terrace of icons here, and a bottom terrace of icons here. So to get down to here, you're basically going down the hill or down the mountain to the bottom. Some of these worker placement spaces on the top terrace and in the middle terrace are marked with a 2-player icon. When you're playing a 2-player game, at the start of the game during setup, there are spaces that are blocked off in a 2-player game in the top terrace, and then a little bit later, maybe a third or so into the game, there are a couple more spaces that are blocked off in the middle terrace. That's only if you're playing a 2-player game. That's described in more detail in the rules. A start player is randomly chosen, and then a couple of housekeeping chores are performed at the start of the game, and then once those are complete, the game proceeds to get started. The first housekeeping chore is that in turn order, each player chooses one of those 4 starting weaving tiles. I don't know for a fact if these are the designs of 4 top weaving tiles. There potentially could be, but they might be a different design, or they might have different bonuses on them. It's hard to say, but this is representative of what they might look like. So purple, it looks like, is the starting player for today's game, and just to get through the rest of setup, I'm going to have purple choose to take this weaving tile. Now, weaving tiles are kept in the player area, and when you purchase a new weaving tile, you place it adjacent to one you already have, or you start a new tapestry by setting it aside. Tapestries consists of multiple weaving tiles that are abutting each other, And there are 7 different designs of weaving tiles, one being this thing that looks like zigzaggy lines forming an X. This one that looks sort of like a bunch of letter G's or spirals. This one that's like a checkerboard pattern. This one looks like rows of triangles. And there are 3 other designs as well. When you're forming a tapestry in your player area, you can't have 2 weavings in the same tapestry that are of the same design. So since there are 7 total designs, your tapestries can never grow longer than 7 tiles. At any time, you can obviously start a new tapestry if you want to, but generally speaking, you'll get more points for longer tapestries. Now, given the fact that this is the top weaving tile of the deck, then I would say that most of the players are probably going to shy away from taking this tile to start with because, like I just said, you can't have duplicates, and this kind of limits your choices. If you didn't want to have to start a new tapestry and you were taking a new weaving tile, you'd want to draw blindly from the deck, but better to know what you're getting into by not having one that matches on the top of the deck. So I think the purple player is going to take this tile. The blue player is going to take this one. There are bonuses on the ends that you could possibly earn when you create a match by putting 2 weaving tiles together in your tapestry. Again, I'll talk more about that when the time comes. The red player is going to take this checkerboard pattern weaving tile, and then this 4th one's going to get removed from the game entirely. Then each player is dealt a hand of 8 god cards. There's a deck of 42 god cards in total. Right now, each player has 8 cards that have been dealt to them, leaving 18 in the deck over here face down. And what each player has to do at the end of setup is to choose 5 of those god cards that they're going to play in front of them face down. And ultimately, in reverse turn order, players are going to resolve those cards and take their benefits. So you might play this card and get a potato and construct a building. You'd have to pay for it. Play this god card and take a free weaving tile. Play this god card to take a free army card. Play this one to get a potato and a worker. When you're choosing these 5 cards, you're choosing the 5 resources and structures that you want to start the game with, but you're also choosing what hand of 3 cards are going to be left over that you're going to start the game with, and that's just as vitally important. I would suspect that you probably want to have some variety, more often than not, in the god cards that are remaining in your hand. So purple is going to choose first. Purple is just playing their 5 cards face down, but it's actually going to be the last player in turn order, the red player, who is going to also choose 5 cards, but they're going to resolve their cards first. And then blue will resolve their cards second, and then purple will go last. And given the fact that buildings are not refreshed over this part of setup, I don't know if it's in purple's best interest to try to construct a building using this god card. So I think I'm going to, because they just chances are they won't get what they wanted, and they may have to just settle for something that they might not have wanted. And worst case is they won't have the resources to pay for it. So I think I'm going to avoid playing this card. For purple, I think this is a good bet to take an army card. You'll see how army cards are used later on, but I'll mark that. Remember, I'm marking 5 of these cards. I'll mark this one to take a free weaving. Here's another weaving tile. I'll take that. We'll start a halfway decent tapestry that way. This one gives me a gold. It's always good to have a wild resource. And lastly, I have a good variety of leftover cards here, so that's perfect. So I will, for my last card, I'll play this god card for a potato and a worker. And that's going to leave me with, let me go back to purple, it's going to leave me with one of each one of these 3 cards right here. Now, these god symbols don't have a name assigned to them, but I kind of refer to them in my program and just to help me identify them by a letter. So I call this a G-type god card because it looks like a G. This one I call a D because it looks like a diamond. This I call an H because it looks like an H. And this I call a C because it looks like a checkerboard pattern. As I said, there are 6 total gods in the game, and those are 4 of them. This one is an A-type, what I call an A-type, because it looks like the letter A, and then this one I call a Z-type because it looks like a zigzag line. The blue player, who is going to be second when it comes to playing these cards, is going next. Now, the blue player has gotten 2 cards that are going to let them possibly build a small statue, but that they have to pay for that, and those cost 3 stone. They start the game with 2 stone, and each one of these cards provides the 3rd stone they would need. So they can't do both of these. They can only do one. So for now, at least, since there's a duplicate A card here, A-type god card, I think, and there's not a duplicate of this, I'll mark this one, at least for now. I can always unmark it. I'll choose to take a weaving tile. I'll choose to take an army card. Corn is always good. Corn is harder to come by, as I said earlier, than potatoes, so I'll take a corn and a worker of my choice from the Nomads. By and large, you take workers from the Nomads with one exception. And then lastly, this one gives me a potato and a point. This one's out of the question. I wouldn't be able to afford to build that statue. An army card, and I'm not constructing a building, or should I? No, I'm not going to have enough stone left over to construct a building after I build this statue. So I think I'll pass on the building, and I'll just go for this potato and victory point. That's good for blue, that he has a card in his hand that matches the symbol on the statue he's building, and you'll see why later on. And finally, red is going to choose this corn and a victory point. Like I said, corn is hard to come by. Weaving tile is always good. I think they will erect a building. Let me see what we've got here. So these passive buildings provide ongoing effects. This one says whenever any player activates the Rejuvenate High Priest secondary action, draw 1 army card and gain 1 gold. And this one, you may treat any worker you place as if it were a yellow courier. Costs of corn and a stone. I like that card. I think I might target that one. This one produces 3 potatoes. This one produces 3 corn. Anyway, I will elect to construct a building. Here's another corn and a worker. And if I take this, then I'm leaving myself with a Z, a G, and an H. For my last card, I'm going to choose the A card, I think. Get another weaving. Okay, so now it's red's turn, red being last in turn order, to play these 5 cards in any order she wants. This one's easy. This is a corn and a victory point. We'll choose a weaving tile. Now I can either choose the one face up or the one face down on the top of the deck. Since this doesn't match what I already have, and it has a bonus that matches this bonus, I think I will take this weaving tile. You can rotate these obviously 180 degrees, but I'm just going to keep it like that. So now I've got 2 weavings that do have a little bit of a bonus match here. The resolution of that match won't happen till later in the game. Now I'll take another weaving tile. The top weaving tile is a good choice. Again, it's different in design, although it doesn't match any of the bonuses I already have. I'll put this one on top and keep the 3 victory point end of it exposed. This gives me a corn and a worker, but let's get this building out of the way. Let's take a potato, and now I am going to go for this building, I think, that allows me to treat any worker as if it were a yellow courier. And you'll find that these workers, as they vary by color, vary by a special ability that they offer. And I like the special ability of the yellow courier, so it's nice to be able to treat any other color as if it were yellow. So that's the building I'm building. It's costing me a stone and a corn, and now I'll use this card to get another corn and a worker from the Nomads. I don't need to take a yellow because, as I said, I have the building that allows me to treat any worker as a yellow, so I'll take the blue architect to add to my existing red warrior and green craftsman. And that is red, and red is left with that 3-card hand as shown. And now blue has to make the same sorts of decisions. Going to get a random army card from the top. You'll see that these army cards have a resource or two on the bottom, and they depict 1 or 2 soldiers on the top. Again, I'll explain how army cards are used later on in this video. We'll take a weaving tile. The top one is a good choice, although it doesn't match. It is a different design. I think I'll rotate it and put it down here so that this end is exposed. Not for any particular reason. Not sure if that's ever going to pay off. We're going to be building a statue here. This is going to use all 3 of my stone, but it is going to provide 3 victory points right away. And I'm building a checkerboard type statue, so it's a small C statue. Remember, we started with 2 of those. There's 1 left in the supply up here. We'll take a corn and a worker. And I'll take a yellow courier since I don't have one. They're always useful to have. And finally, a potato and a victory point. And then finally, purple is going to take a weaving. This one doesn't match. I think I'll just put it down like that. An army card. Another one with 1 soldier. A gold. Gold is always nice to have. I don't think any other player took a gold. Another weaving tile. This one is a duplicate. You can see the design is the same. So I'm going to take my chances and draw blind and hope I get something different. I did. I got the box pattern. And it's a match. So I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees and put it up here so that the 3 points match up. This one provides a potato and a worker. And I'll take another courier. And now the game is ready to start. Now on your first turn, and right now it is purple's first turn as the starting player, before you do anything else, you have to choose a space on the Coricancha for your high priest. Now that's going to dictate in large part how you start the game. And I'm not going to study the board here and try to pick an optimal space. I think I'm just going to put purple right here. And when it's blue's first turn and red's first turn, they'll have to put their high priest down as well. High priests can be placed on any space, even if it's occupied by another player. It doesn't matter. All the players can be on the same space if they wanted to, although that's not necessarily a good idea. All right, so that's the setup, and now we're ready to start the game. And I'm not, as I said, I'm not going to play through the game, but let me talk about what it is you do on your turn. So there are 2 different things you could possibly do on your turn. You have to choose one option. You can either place a worker, or you could perform 2 different secondary actions. There are 4 secondary actions that you can choose from. Then you have to choose 2 different secondary actions, and you can of course resolve them in any order. I'll talk more about those later. Arguably the tougher thing to understand here, especially if you're trying to learn the game by watching this video as opposed to reading the rule book, the first thing you want to get your arms around is how to place a worker. So let me talk about that first. I should also mention, however, that another thing that you could do as a free action any number of times during your turn If you needed an extra resource or so, you could always get rid of an army card and collect whatever it is that's depicted on the bottom of it. So I could discard this army card if I wanted to get an extra gold. I already have a gold. But army cards serve a bigger purpose than that, and I'll talk about that purpose later on in the game. So I'm not sure it's always in your best interest to resolve these unless you really are sorely in need of a resource at a particular point in the game. Given the fact that placing a worker is perhaps the trickier aspect of this game, I'll talk about that first. Obviously, if you're placing a worker, the first thing you have to do is choose one of the workers in your supply to place. So I could either place this blue architect or I could place this yellow courier. And you'll see why you might want to choose one over the other a little bit later on. But for now, just suffice to say, you've obviously got to choose a worker if you're going to place a worker. Furthermore, you have to choose a god card in your hand. I have a summary of what's in my hand down here by god symbol. So I know I have a G card and it's showing there in the corner. I have a D card and I have a C card, a checkerboard card. And I also have one army card in my hand as well. So by picking a god symbol, you are narrowing down which worker placement spots you might be able to place your worker on. So for example, let's say I was going to place a yellow worker. If I was going to use this god card, the G card, then I'm basically saying I'm going to put this worker on one of the spots that has the G symbol on it. If I decided to use this god card, the D card, then I'm saying, okay, I'm going to choose to put this worker down on a D spot. Or finally, if I choose this card, I'm basically saying I'm going to place this worker on a checkerboard pattern spot. Now, if I wanted to, I could avoid playing a god card altogether, and I could play my gold. Gold is wild and allows you to place the worker on any god space, regardless of whether you have a card that matches it or not. For now, let me just mark this one. I'm not going to actually do anything with it, but I'm narrowing down which spaces that I might be able to put this worker on. The next thing I have to consider is the cost of placing the worker. Sometimes there's a cost in food of placing a worker. Now, you can think of your workers as hanging out with your high priest up here in the Coricancha. So imagine that my two couriers and my blue architect are kind of all in this space, just chowing down or whatever. If I were to place my worker in this segment of the board, in this section and this terrace, it's very easy for them to go to work there. All they have to do is essentially step off the patio of the Coricancha and they're there. So it's free to place a worker in the segment at the top of the hill where your high priest resides. And each one of these segments consists of 5 god symbols. You can see there's a worker placement spot here that has a blue diamond, a black H, a black zigzag, a black checkerboard, and of course the black G that I currently have highlighted. So it doesn't cost anything to place a worker here. But if you're going to ask your worker to travel a little bit around the board by moving clockwise or counterclockwise around the Coricancha, I think it means Golden Temple. If you were going to send your worker to the next segment over, either here or here, the one that's adjacent to the segment marked by your high priest, you have to pay a food because they have to travel from here to there. It's not so easy for them. There's a little bit of an effort they have to exert. That costs 1 food. If you're going to send your worker all the way across the wheel to the opposite side, where you're talking a distance of 2 segments from where your high priest resides, then you've got to pay your worker 3 food to get there. That's a little harder for them. That's all indicated by this little chart I have showing here. 0 food if you're going to put your worker where your high priest is located. 1 if you're going to choose a space that's immediately adjacent to the segment where your high priest is located. And 3 food if you're placing in a segment that's 2 segments away from where your high priest is located. So that's called the roaming cost, because you're asking your worker to roam around either clockwise or counterclockwise around the hill. But there's also a descending cost if you're going to ask your worker to move himself down the hill, either to the middle terrace or to the bottom terrace. You can think of this as a pretty steep mountain, and it's not so easy to get down there without cracking open your head. So if you're going to ask your worker to move to the middle terrace, you have to pay an additional 2 food. If you're asking your worker to move all the way to the bottom terrace, you have to pay 5 food to get there. Not 5 plus 2, just 5 total to get from the top, from the Coricancha essentially, to the bottom terrace. Now we're racking up a lot of food. So worst possible case is if you send your worker to the opposite side of the board and all the way at the bottom of the hill, like over here, we're talking about paying 3 food for the roaming cost and 5 food for the descending cost, for a total of 8 food. That is a very steep price to pay to send your worker all the way over there. So, of course, what do I have? I have 1 food and 1 gold. So that doesn't give me a whole lot of bargaining power. However, in order to combat the steepness of the hilly region in which the Inca people lived, they built steps to get down the hills. And if there's a set of steps, and you could, for example, build a set of steps right here that connects the top terrace to the middle terrace, that reduces the cost of moving down the mountain by 2 food. So essentially it's saying that, okay, well, the cost to get from here to here, if there were a set of steps here, is now 0, because it would normally be 2 food, but now you've reduced it by 2. If you want to build steps, you have to build the steps near the top of the mountain first before you build steps that connect the middle terrace to the bottom terrace. But if there were a set of steps here, and you built another set of steps here, you or any other player for that matter, then to get from the Coricancha to the bottom terrace is no longer 5 food, it's now 5 minus 2 minus 2, or 1 food. Much easier. If you use another player's set of stairs to move your worker down the hill, and you can't avoid the stairs, if the worker sees the stairs, he's going to take them. You can't just say, don't use the stairs. I want you to try to just ski down the mountain. If you use another player's stairs, that player earns 1 victory point when you do use their steps. If you're using your own steps, too bad, you don't get any points, but at least you reduced the food cost of moving your worker down the hill. So that's the roaming cost and the descending cost. So far we've chosen a worker, we've chosen a god card, and we've probably chosen a couple of locations where we might want to send the worker. Now, why are we placing a worker at all? Well, it's so that we can perform tasks that are in the vicinity of the worker placement space where we're sending the worker. There are actually a total of 11 different kinds of tasks you can perform on the board, but each of the worker placement spots is surrounded by 3 tasks. You can see that this one has a set of potatoes and a couple of stone, and this is an army card. Potatoes, remember I said, are a hardy root vegetable, and they're easy to find at the top of the mountain. You can see that they're populating quite densely the top terrace, a little bit on the middle terrace, nothing on the bottom. Corn, on the other hand, needs a warmer climate, so they want to be at the bottom of the mountain. So to find corn, you have to look either in the middle terrace to a certain degree, but more often than not, you're talking about the bottom terrace. If you're mining for gold, you'll only find gold on the bottom terrace as well. Stone is found just about anywhere. Let me get rid of that and turn on stone. You can see stones all over the place, but there's still not a lot of stone. We want to be picking a worker placement spot where there's a task that we might want to perform. But we can't perform all the tasks necessarily. We can only perform a certain number of tasks, and that's the last wrinkle of the puzzle. How many tasks can you perform once you place your worker? Well, that's a relatively simple calculation. First of all, you get one task automatically just for placing the worker. Beyond that, you get an extra task for every adjacent worker of the same color that you're placing. An adjacent spot refers to a spot that is one task away along the path. So for example, if I was looking at this worker placement spot here, then this worker placement spot is adjacent because it's one task away, the potatoes. This one's adjacent because you go up here to the stone and then over. This one's adjacent, and this one is adjacent. So this one is adjacent to 4 other spaces. But let's consider the zigzag. The zigzag's adjacent to this one, to this one, to this one, to this one, and to this one. Every worker placement spot is adjacent to 4 or 5 other worker placement spaces. So I suppose potentially if you were putting down a worker that was adjacent to 4 other or 5 other spaces occupied by workers of the same color, something that is highly unlikely, you could potentially gain 5 additional tasks. By the way, that when I was talking about adjacency of worker placement spaces, you cannot consider a worker placement space on a different terrace to be adjacent. The last part of the equation is the special ability that the worker offers. Let's talk about those yellow couriers first. Remember, I was especially fond of them because if you're placing a yellow courier and it's the first worker in the segment, and since purple's taking the first turn, if they used a courier, by definition, it's going to be the first worker in this segment of 5 worker placement spaces. You gain an additional task for doing that. So if I place this yellow courier on this worker placement spot, I'm now able to do 2 tasks instead of just 1. The other ability of the yellow courier is that they reduce your food cost by 1 to a minimum of 0. They're a very hardy bunch. I guess the couriers are all used to running about delivering messages or bringing in takeout for the high priest. I don't know. So they're running around quite a bit, and they can rely on less food to get through their day. So they reduce your food cost by 1. So for example, I could place this yellow courier over here, and while the cost would normally be 1 food to place over here, the courier would reduce that by 1 down to 0. The blue architects, if played on a blue space, like this space or this space, let me highlight the blue spaces here. If you place a blue architect on a blue space, then you are gaining an additional task. If you're placing a green craftsman on a green space, these are all the green spaces, you're also gaining an additional task. White priests also give you the ability to gain an additional task, but you have to pay a potato to be able to gain that additional task. And you can only pay 1 potato to gain 1 task with the priest. The other thing the priest does, because he's a priest, is he grants you a god card that you draw after you've performed your tasks. Finally, the red warrior doesn't give you the ability to gain an additional task, but it allows you to steal or kidnap a worker that's adjacent to the red warrior when you place the red warrior, as long as you're not kidnapping another red warrior. And that is the only way that workers can be removed from the board, by placing a red warrior next to another colored worker and then essentially adding that worker to your supply and removing it from the board. So those are the ways that you can possibly gain additional tasks. You get 1 task for placing the worker. You can gain 1 additional task for every worker adjacent to where you're placing your worker that's of the same color. And then finally, you can use the special ability of the worker. Let's talk a little bit more about tasks. Now, most of the time, I said, you're going to be lucky if you perform 2 tasks, maybe even 3. But it's not going to happen often at all that you're going to be able to get away with spending more than 3 tasks. When you're spending your tasks, you have to divide them equally among the 3 task symbols surrounding the worker placement space where you're placing your worker. So if you're assigned 1 task and you're not getting a bonus from your worker, maybe you're placing a red warrior on an isolated spot somewhere, then you obviously choose one of the 3 tasks that is surrounding the space where you're placing the worker. More often, you're going to be able to perform 2 tasks, and in that case, you have to perform 2 different tasks of the 3 that surround the worker placement space. If you're lucky enough to be able to perform 3 tasks, you have to do each one of the 3 tasks surrounding the worker placement space 1 time. Again, you can do them in any order you want, but you can't double up. Now, if you're really lucky and you have 4 tasks or 5 tasks that you're able to spend, then you first have to choose each task once. That's 3. Then you can choose any one of the 3 to do a second time for your 4th task, and then another task, a different one, to perform a second time for your 5th task. So you do have to spread them out evenly in that way. You're picking a god card. You're picking a worker. The god card is dictating which spaces where you could potentially place your worker. You're calculating how much food you might have to pay, the roaming or descending cost of the worker, and then you're calculating how many tasks you can perform based on where you're placing the worker, what's adjacent to it, and what the special ability is of the worker that you're placing happens to be. As I was saying, there are 11 different tasks that you could possibly perform on the mountain. Many times you're just going to be collecting potatoes, or you're going to be collecting stone, or you're going to be, if you get lucky enough to get to the bottom of the mountain, you might be getting some gold or some corn. But in other cases, you might be doing getting a weaving. And you can see this is a slightly different symbol than the weaving symbol we saw on the god card, so this works a little bit differently, as does the army card symbol. That works a little bit differently as well. I think I'm going to go through a bunch of different examples now to show you how this works in practice. Right now it is Purple's turn. Let's choose this G symbol, this G card. Let's choose the yellow courier. I will place the yellow courier here. It won't cost me any food because it's in the segment where my high priest is located. And the yellow courier does grant me 1 extra task. These are the 3 tasks I can choose from, and I have to choose 2 different tasks to perform for placing this yellow courier. I think I'm going to do training. That's similar to what I was doing earlier, taking army cards, but when you do training, you're drawing 2 army cards and choosing 1, and then the other one is just discarded into the army card discard pile. So I think I will do a training, and I think it's always better to probably grab 2 soldiers rather than 1. You'll see why later on. However, this one provides a corn, which might be good in a pinch, but I am going to take the one that provides 2 soldiers. I already have one that provides 1 soldier. So that was my first task, and now for my second task, I think because I have so few potatoes and I do have some stone, I think I'm just going to go with the 3 potatoes and stock up on a little food. And then my god card that I chose goes into the offer next to the deck of face down god cards, and the size of the offer varies by the number of players in the game. When you're playing a 3-player game, you could have as many as 4 cards in the offer. You'll find that if you happen to be placing a card in the offer at the end of your turn and the offer already has 4 cards in it face up in a 3-player game, you first have to shuffle those back into the deck and start anew with a brand new offer. The other thing that happens at the end of your turn is that you have the opportunity to take a worker from the village. You have to pay a potato if you want to take the one from the north end of the village. You have to pay a corn if you want to take the worker from the south end of the village. And by taking a worker from the village, you're dictating how fast the game is going to proceed. Because when you take the last worker from the village, and the village is now empty, then you have triggered what's called a festival scoring. That's going to happen at the start of your next turn. I'll talk more about that later on. But the game ends after 3 festival scorings. And the game is going to end, therefore, when the village is emptied 3 times. Remember I said that workers are a dwindling resource, so it's possible the festival, when it's time to refill the village, we won't be able to fill it because there won't be enough workers in the bag. We might only have 4 or 5 workers in the village as opposed to 6, as we have right now. It's possible that you might only have 1 worker to place in the village, or no workers to place in the village. It's early in the game. I already have 2 workers. If I did take a worker from the village, I'd have to discard the worker from the game anyway. I'm not in any rush right now, so I'm not going to purchase a worker from the village, and I'm just going to end my turn right now. The blue player has an H, a C, and an A-type god card, and 1 army card in hand. We have to choose the location for our priest first. You can choose any one of the 5 spaces. You can even choose the space that already is occupied by the purple high priest. Let's take a quick look and see. So I have H's over there. Some checkerboards scattered about. Not too many A's. And there is a bonus to be had if I play a checkerboard god card because I have a checkerboard statue. And the bonus you get is that you get to claim whatever's shown at the bottom of the god card before you discard it, before or after that you perform the tasks. So if I were to play this god card, I could get another army card that I could draw from the top of the deck. For now, I'm going to choose this H, and for purposes of my high priest, I think I'm going to put the high priest over in this space. I have my eye on this worker placement space. However, a yellow worker here. So what if I were to place it here? I would get 2 tasks. I wouldn't have to pay any food. Normally I would have to pay 1 food, but remember you reduce that by 1 food because you're placing a courier. And I get 2 tasks out of it, and I could either build steps, I could collect potatoes or stone. Now, steps cost 3 stone to build, so that's kind of out of the question for me because I don't have any stone. So even if I collected 2 stone, I wouldn't be able to build steps. But I could start collecting some stone and some potatoes. So I think I am going to place, I haven't chosen a worker. I'm going to place the courier here. I get 2 tasks. Doesn't cost me any food. I'm going to gain potatoes, and I'm going to gain 2 stone. Goes into the offer. Done. I'm not going to choose a worker from the village. I'm going to bypass that. We'll move on to the red player. We have to choose a place for our high priest. I think I'm going to put the high priest up here. And maybe I'll aim to put the blue architect on this space. I have 1 stone. So if I collect 2 more stone, this allows me to build steps. I could then build some steps. And there are rewards to be had for building steps, as you'll soon see. I am going to put the blue architect on this space. It doesn't cost me anything because it's right next to where my high priest happens to be. I get 2 tasks that I can perform. Thank you. There's my god card. I'm going to gain 2 stone first. Now I have 3 stone that I need to build steps. When you build steps, you gain 2 potatoes, 1 corn, and 4 victory points. So it's not a bad deal. And I think I will build my steps probably in the section where I happen to be so I can make easy use of them. So I'm going to put them there. So I just collected 2 potatoes, a corn, and 4 points, and now I'm ahead with a score of 15. Not by much, but it's something to be said for that. Of course, my steps are going the wrong way. I'm going up the steps to get downhill, but sorry about that. That's just the way my program works. The card that I played is added to the offer, and now there's only room for 1 more card in the offer before it gets cleared out and we start a new offer. I am not going to take a worker from the village, so we go back to purple. If they played that yellow courier, they could perform 3 tasks. If they played and they do happen to have a checkerboard god card in their hand, they could go there. There's something to be said for that. What would I be able to do? I'd be able to build steps, but I only have 2 stone, and I can only get potatoes from this worker placement space, not stone. So I do have a gold, but I don't know that I want to spend the gold that quickly, so I'm not ready to do that yet. I think instead, what if I were to take this blue architect and use the D card and go on this blue space here? Then I could get some stone, and I could build steps if I wanted to, because I have 2 stone, and I would get 2 more stone. And I think I like the look of that reward that the red player just got, so I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to go here, because I'm putting a blue architect on a blue space. I get an extra task so that I get to perform 2 tasks. I'll take 2 stone and use 3 of the 4 to build steps, and I'll put my steps next to my high priest as well. Again, you have to build the top set of steps before you build the bottom set of steps. So there's my steps, and I get the 4 points and the 2 potatoes and the 1 corn. And again, I am not going to take a worker from the village. Let's go back. Let's go to the blue player. Blue player is going to play a white priest, and they have a choice of here or here. This one allows them to build a building. I think I like that idea. I think I'm going to place here. With the priest, you can always gain 1 additional task by paying 1 potato. And I've got a lot of potatoes from my last turn, so I'm going to pay a potato to gain an additional task. And because I'm using a god card that matches my statue, I get to gain whatever is shown on the bottom of the god card, either before or after I perform the task. In this case, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to draw an army card and add it to my hand, and I got one with 2 soldiers on it. Now I get to perform 2 tasks. I'll do training first to get another army card. I've got 3 potatoes, so when I perform training, I draw 2 and keep 1. I'll take the first army card, the one with 2 soldiers on it. So now I've got 3 army cards with 5 soldiers. That's going to prove to be very useful later on. And now I'm going to construct a building, and I have my eye not on this one, but rather on the one that produces corn, because corn's hard to come by, and having a building that produces corn is probably a good idea. So I am going to build this. Now, I should point out that when you are choosing a building, you always have the option of discarding a god card from your hand. Now, you can't discard the one that you're playing on your turn, but if I wanted to, I could discard this god card to remove 2 of these buildings from the display and move them back to the bottom of their respective stacks, and then draw 2 more buildings to get some more variety. But I'm happy taking this particular building and having the option of producing 3 corn at some point. That cost me a potato, a corn, and a stone, by the way. Because I placed a priest, I have to choose a god card from the offer. Or I could draw blindly from the top of the deck. Now, because I have a small C statue, it is in my interest to have cards that are C-type cards. Unfortunately, there isn't one to choose from. I could take the one blindly from the top and hope it's a checkerboard pattern. It's probably not going to be. The odds are against that. And then if I do that, when I place my army card, my god card, first I have to clear out the offer because it's full, shuffle those cards back into the god stack, or just stick them in a discard pile. It doesn't matter what you do. And then I would start with a new offer. I think I'm going to take my chances and draw blindly from the top of the deck. I got another A card. Okay, whatever. And now you can see that the offer's been cleaned out. God cards have look like they've been reshuffled, or possibly I wasn't keeping track of what the count happened to be. But now we have an offer with only one card in it. I only have potatoes, so do I want to pay a potato for the white priest? I think I will, because I only have a red warrior. And having and I do have potatoes, so the priest is not a bad idea. And now there's a checkerboard card in the offer, so I could get that card back and use it again later on. So I am going to take the white priest and then end my turn. Where's red? Red's over here. Has potatoes and corn, no stone. What if I were to take my green craftsman and go to this green space? I could get 2 tasks, but I would have to pay 1 food. I'd have to pay a potato to place there. But just for demonstration purposes, let's do it. I don't know if that's necessarily a good idea, but let's go there. We have to pay a food, so I'll pay a potato. And now I get to perform 2 tasks. One because for placing the worker, and one because I placed a green worker on a green space. I will take more potatoes. And I will do training. I got 2 cards with 1 soldier on them. I'll take that one. Doesn't really matter too much. Sure, let's pay a corn for that blue worker on the bottom of the village. Purple's turn. Let's see if we could be a little more daring with place a worker. Use the gold instead of choosing a god card. And what if we were to be brave and take our courier and go somewhere down here into the lower tiers? We have stairs now, so it would cost us 3 food minus 1 because we're placing a courier, so it would cost us 2 food. If I were to go here, I could build a statue. I could get 2 stone, and then I'd have 3 stone, and I could build a statue. I think I'm going to do that. So we're going to go there. I have to pay 2 food. I'm going to pay 2 potatoes. I'm going to gain 2 stone, although that 2 corn is very enticing. But I'm going to stay focused. I'm going to take 2 stone, and with my 3 stone, I'm now going to build a small statue. If you want to build a large statue, you need to pay 3 stone and 2 gold. I'm going to build a statue, and I have my choice now of any one of these. And what do I have? I have a C-type god card in my hand that pays a potato. Well, I guess I might as well take a C statue. Remember, I think blue has the other one, so if I take this one, there's not going to be any more small C statues left. So I just built a small C statue for 3 stone. That pays 3 victory points right away. If I were to build a large statue for 3 stone and 2 gold, that pays 9 victory points right away. And now I can spend a potato or a corn to recruit red. I don't have any workers here, so it probably is not a bad idea to do that. I will pay a corn for the blue worker. So let's end purple's turn. To demonstrate the next turn, I am going to give blue a couple more resources than they already have. I'm going to give them a couple more potatoes and maybe 3 corn, because I want to demonstrate how purchase weavings work. So I'm going to place a worker. I'm going to place this white priest using this A God card. I actually have 2 of them, so I'll just pick that one. And I'm going to go down here and use purple steps. So purple's going to get a point out of this. I'm going to pay a potato. Purple gets that victory point because I'm using their steps. You gain a task by paying another potato. And for demonstration purposes, I think I also want to give red some corn as well. You'll see why. Okay, we're back to blue. I get to perform 2 tasks. The first task is going to be produce 1 building. This allows me to take one of my production buildings and produce with it. And I just produce without doing anything to the building. In other times when you're doing production, you have to turn the building face down, and now it's tapped and unusable for the time being. But this allows me to produce a face-up building without having to flip it face down. So this is going to generate 3 corn because the building produces 3 corn. And now I'm going to do a purchase weavings task. This works differently than getting a free weaving from a God card. This takes the weaving tile that was face up, and you draw 2 more, so you have a choice of 3 to select from. And now the active player can buy one of those weavings for 1 corn. They can buy a second weaving for 2 more corn, and they could buy a third weaving for 3 more corn. So first of all, I have plenty of corn now because I just produced, so I have 6 corn. So I'm going to take this weaving tile and place it up here because it's different. I'm going to take this weaving tile because it's different. This is going to cost me 2 more corn. I'm down to 3 now from 6. I think I'll flip this around and put it down here. But this one's a duplicate because I already have this and I don't feel like starting a new tapestry, so I'm done. But because there are leftovers, any player, starting with the player after me in turn order, any player who has 3 corn can choose one of the leftovers if they want to. Their option. And I just gave red some extra corn. So red now has the option of buying this leftover for 3 corn if they want to, because red's next in turn order. So red says, sure, I'll take it. It's a little bit of a steep price to pay, but I'll put it down here. It forms a match. And now there's no more leftovers, and nobody else had corn, so that's the end of that. And now we're back to blue. Because blue placed a priest, they have to choose a God card from the offer. They have a C statue, so I think they're going to take the C card. Then the A card that they used gets added to the offer, and they have a red worker. They could get a yellow from the village if they wanted to. Sure. I gave them extra corn anyway. And I think I want to do one more demonstration. For my last demonstration, I think I want to give red, I'm going to give them a gold. I'm going to give them a couple corn, another corn. And now I'm going to place a worker. I'm going to place a blue architect, but treat it as if it were a yellow courier because they have this special building that lets them do that. I'm going to use a gold instead of the God card that I have. And I'm going to play in this space. They do have to pay 2 food. 5 minus 2 is 3, less 1 for the yellow courier. So I'm going to have them place there, and they're going to pay 2 food. They're going to pay 2 potato. And now I want to demonstrate the merchant task first, which the merchant task resolves all the matches in your weaving tiles. But actually, before I do that, I'm going to do purchase weavings. So I just demonstrated that. This one I'm going to grab for 1 corn and put it up here. I have 2 corn left over. This one's a duplicate, but this one is not. And this is a match, so I will take that one, rotate it, and put it down here. And if anybody else had 3 corn, they could have purchased the leftover, but nobody else did, so that just gets discarded. And now for the second task, I'm going to do a merchant task which resolves all of the matches I have. So I'm going to get 3 points. I'm going to be able to spend a gold. I'm going to give myself another gold. Well, I gave myself 3 gold. I'm going to be able to spend a gold to advance 1 space on the temple track. This doesn't do anything for me, this Rejuvenate. I'll talk more about that shortly. And I'm going to get 3 potatoes out of that match. So let's do a merchant. I should get 3 points and 3 potatoes, and a chance to advance on the temple track. Yeah, I'll spend a gold to go up on the temple track. If there were resources in the step I'm moving into, I would have gained those resources, but there are no resources for the first step, unfortunately. If I spend a gold to advance, I get 3 potatoes. I got 3 points, I think. Did I get my points? Increase score by 3? I did. And that's enough of that. So I just wanted to demonstrate the last task. I think I've shown all the tasks now. Potatoes, stone, corn. We didn't collect gold, but that's pretty straightforward. I showed you training, where you draw 2 army cards and pick one. I showed you purchase weavings. I showed you building steps. I showed you constructing a building, building a statue. I showed producing 1 building and merchant. So I've shown all the tasks. So we're going to cancel and end the turn. And now I want to talk more about how you perform 2 different secondary actions. Well, there are 4 secondary actions that you can choose from, and 3 of them are very simple. So I'm going to talk about those 3 first. So I'm going to say 2 secondary actions. And the first one I want to talk about is training. This works just like the training task that I already demonstrated when you placed a worker. You draw 2 army cards, you pick one, you discard the other. So if I were going to do training, I get 2 army cards, I pick one, I'll take the one that has 2, they both have 2 soldiers on them, doesn't really matter, I'll take the one with the gold. And now the next one I want to demonstrate is the recruiting secondary action. That allows me to choose a worker from the Nomads. So maybe I only have 1 red warrior right now. Maybe I want to draw the yellow courier, and that's immediately replaced by another one randomly from the bag. And now it's the end of my turn, and just like the end of my turn when I'm placing a worker, I can take a worker from the village if I want to. I have 2 already. I'm just going to cancel. So those are 2 of the secondary actions you could choose from. Let's do another choose 2 secondary actions. The other simple one is praying. This allows you to draw 2 god cards, one from the offer or blindly from the face down deck. Take a look at the one you drew and then draw a second one, either from the offer or from face down blindly from the top of the deck. So that's very straightforward as well. Because I currently have a checkerboard and I'd like another checkerboard, maybe I want to draw blindly and hope for the best, because there's only a G and an A in the offer. So what if I drew blindly? Okay, I got an H god card. Let's try again. I got a D. So I didn't get what I wanted. The odds were against me. But that's how praying works. You draw 2 more god cards if you're running short of god cards, and you want to place some more workers, for example. The more complicated secondary action is moving your high priest. And this is going to take a little bit to show you. So, because when you move your high priest, you can move the priest 1 or 2 spaces clockwise from its current position. Now we're currently playing as purple, which means, and purple is here, so purple can move here or here. However, I want to talk about these in a certain order. I just cheated. I am going to allow purple to go to this space, the offering space, even though they normally wouldn't be able to do that. But I can cheat with my program and get around that rule and have them go there. And now we perform the offering action. The offering action allows the player to spend 2, 4, or 6 corn to advance 1, 2, or 3 steps on the temple track, gaining resources as they go. Or they could screw the task, I just want to gain 1 gold. After they're done doing whatever it is they're doing, whether they're taking a gold or advancing 1 step or 2 steps or 3 steps, whatever the case may be, each other player in turn order, starting with the next player in turn order, has the option of spending 3 corn exactly to advance 1 space exactly on the temple track. So it's a little bit pricey, but they do have that option to do it. So I just gave purple 6 corn. This is going to allow them to move 1 step, then here, which is going to get them, what is that, a potato and a god card, and then up here they're going to be able to do a training action, draw 2 army cards and keep 1. So let's have them go 3 steps, spending 6 corn. First they landed here, which gave them a potato and a god card. Well, again, we could draw from the face-up offer or draw blindly from the top of the deck. Or, you know, that might be draw blindly from the top of the deck. That, I think, might be draw blindly. I don't think that gives you... So this is a bug in my program that's giving me the option to draw from the offer. I don't think this space on the temple track permits that. I think you just get 1 from the top of the deck. So I'll just take the top one from the top of the deck. And now they've moved up to the next space. They draw 2. This one definitely gets, there's a little eye symbol here, which means you draw 2 and you keep 1. So I'll keep the one with 2 soldiers. And now, do I want a potato? No, I don't want to pay to purchase another. So I'm done. Let's move on to the next player. I now want to perform another 2 secondary actions. Again, move the High Priest. This time it's blue. So I demonstrated how offering works. Now I'm going to demonstrate how worship works. So again, blue would normally be able to move here or here, but I'm going to cheat and move them all the way over here, which they normally wouldn't be able to do. But this is the worshiping section. This is another way to advance on the temple track, and you do it by discarding a statue. If you discard a small statue and it's removed from the game, you can advance 1 step on the temple track. If you discard a large statue, then you could advance 3 steps on the temple track. Or, of course, as always, you can take a gold if you don't have a statue to discard, or you don't want to discard one of your statues. I would say this is probably usually not something you'd want to do until later in the game. You don't get points for statues at the end of the game, nor do you get them during a festival scoring. So I would say that if you have any statues, near the end of the game, you probably want to get rid of them to get a couple more spaces up on the temple track. So I would say it's in your best interest to get to this worshiping space before the game ends so you can make use of your statues, because I don't think there's any other, you're not going to get any other benefit out of it. And at the end of the game, it's too late now to make use of them, to spend God, you know, you get that benefit when you're using a God card that matches your statue, but if it's near the end of the game, you're probably better off advancing 1 step on the temple track. Anyhow, let's say it is near the end of the game, so I'm gonna, for blue, I am gonna discard my small C statue to advance 1 step. Now every other player, again in turn order, can discard a small or a large statue, but they can only advance 1 step on the track. So purple could discard their small c statue if they wanted to. What would they get by doing so? They'd get a stone and they'd gain a worker from the Nomads. So say maybe they said, okay, yeah, I don't need the statue anymore. Let's get rid of it. Let's take a stone. And why is it saying 0 potato? That's a bug in my program. I apologize for that. I'm not sure why it says that. But let's say maybe they wanted a white priest. So let's take a white priest from the Nomad. And now they get their second of two secondary actions. Let's just do a training and cancel and end the turn. And now we'll, because for every one of these 5 spaces, there's something else to show. So the next thing I want to show is the produce, except red doesn't have a building to produce. So let's give red a building. 3 corn or potatoes building. This one is a passive building that gives them that special ability, but it doesn't produce. I'm going to do 2 secondary actions, move High Priest, and I want to move red, which is here, to the produce space, which is here. This is entirely legal because it's 2 spaces away. So I'm going to move them there. And now red can produce from any one of their production buildings, and they get the special bonus of being able to flip face up any one building that might be face down, either before or after they produce. So what they can do is they can produce, flip the building face down. This building produces 3 corn or 3 potatoes. Let's say they want 3 corn. Now they can, for free, as a bonus, because they're the one who's performing the produce action, can flip this face up again, and now they can produce from it again. But now it's going to be permanently face down until something else happens. But let's say they wanted 3 more corn, so they just got 6 corn out of that building by doing a produce action, and now every player in turn order who has a production building in their supply can produce from it if they want to, but of course they have to flip it face down. So let's say blue is going to do that. They get 3 corn, they flip their building face down. Now nobody else has any production buildings. Red has to choose another secondary action. I'll just do training, and I'll take the 2 soldiers, and that's that. The next move High Priest action we need to take a look at is Conquest. 2 secondary actions, move High Priest. I'm going to force purple to move to the Conquest action space. The first thing that happens when a player is taking this Conquest action as a result of moving their High Priest, you have to move a worker from the village into the Casualties of War section, which is up here in the left corner, upper left corner of the game board. That if players are sort of stalling the end of the game, this is one other way to get a worker out of the village. So we'll just move this red warrior. And now purple has the option of either participating in the conquest or, as usual, just saying, I'll take 1 gold. But we're going to have purple participate in the conquest. Purple, now the first part of this is playing army cards from your hand into your tableau in front of you. Now you may have army cards that you had played previously in earlier turns that are sitting in front of you. Maybe some are flipped, maybe some aren't. But this is another opportunity to play additional army cards that you've earned since the last conquest. The first one that purple can play from their hand is free. So let's say they want to play this. Let's say their goal is to play all their army cards. So they're going to play this one for free. And for every other army card in your hand, you have to pay 1 potato in order to play it to your tableau. So we're going to pay a potato to play this card, the tableau of army cards over here. And then lastly, this final one, 1 soldier. Okay, so that cost purple 2 potatoes. The first army card that they played was free, and then each additional army card cost them 1 potato. And now that they've got army cards that are played into their tableau, they can use those army cards to conquer a space in one of the 4 regions of the Inca Empire. And those regions are referred to as Chinchasuyu, Antisuyu, Qualisuyu, down here in the bottom left corner, sorry, and bottom right corner is Kuntasuyu. So Suyu means region, and Tawantinsuyu means 4 regions, and then each of the regions obviously ends in that same Suyu suffix. What they actually mean beyond that's the extent of my historical knowledge. Okay, so now that purple has played some army cards into their tableau, they can use those army cards to conquer one of the spaces, one of the 20 available spaces, and they're going to do this by taking a marker, one of their conquest markers, and playing it to a space of their choice. Now, obviously, if you've run out of conquest markers because you've already conquered 10 spaces, then you can't participate in conquest any longer. So we've got 2 soldiers, 2 soldiers, and 1 soldier. So let's suppose I'll have them come over here and conquer this space, which is 2 corn and 1 gold. That's what it produces. But in order to conquer it, you need to flip 2 soldiers, and you need to discard 2 soldiers. Fortunately, they've got 2 cards that have 2 soldiers depicted on them, so they're going to have to flip one of these and discard the other. So they're going to select this space, and now we have to choose the army card that we're going to flip, and the other one is going to get discarded, the other one that depicts 2 soldiers, that is. So let's say we're going to flip this one. This next one gets discarded. I'm going to double click it to select it, and now we get the 2 corn and the 1 gold from conquering that space. Now that purple's done, every other player in turn order can do the same thing. They don't get to play an army card for free. They have to pay 1 potato for every army card. So blue only has 2 potatoes. So let's say they're going to play this one and they're going to play this one, both of their doubles. And they could come down here, for example, and conquer this space, or maybe they want to conquer this space over here that earns them 7 victory points, discarding flipping 2 soldiers and discarding 2 soldiers. So they're going to choose that space. They're going to flip this one. The other one gets discarded. They earn 7 points. Red now gets to do the same thing. They've got enough potatoes to play all of their army cards. 1, 2, 3. You don't obviously have to play, once you've played these army cards, you don't have to use them all in conquering a space. You can choose, for example, to keep some for a future conquest. But let's say that red has their eye on this space to earn 11 points. They have to flip 2 soldiers and discard 3. So they can flip one of these cards that has 2 soldiers on it, and the other 2 cards are going to go away. So let's say they flip this one. The others go away. They earn 11 points. And now, because purple was the active player who chose Conquest, gets 1 more turn to perform another Conquest if they still have army cards face up in front of them. And they do. They saved 1 soldier so they can perform 1 additional conquest. And let's say that they are going to come over here and collect 2 god cards. Again, I assume these are god cards from the top of the deck as opposed to choosing from the offer. I'm not absolutely certain about that. I'll have to check on that. But let's say they want to conquer this space. They flip their only remaining soldier card. I'll just take 2 cards from the top of the deck. 1, 2. and then that ends the conquest action. So the active player gets two bonuses. They get to play one of their army cards for free without having to pay a potato, and they get to conquer two spaces instead of just one space, so that the turn comes back around to them before the conquest action is over. If instead of choosing to perform the conquest action, you say, I just want to collect one gold, then that's it. You get the gold, but you don't participate in the conquest. But every other player still does. They can pay one potato per army card that they want to play and use their face-up army cards to discard and or flip them to conquer one space. We'll finish up Purple's turn by performing, again, a training. And we will not take the last, well, yeah, let's suppose we are going to take the last worker from the village. So this is going to activate the festival. It's going to trigger the festival. The festival scoring won't actually happen until the beginning of Purple's next turn. At the time that, in this case, Purple removes the last worker from the village, then they are going to score 1 point if they're activating the first festival, 2 points if they're triggering the second festival, or 4 points if they're triggering the third festival. So it's 1, 2, or 4 victory points. This is obviously the first festival, so they're going to score 1 point right now for taking this last worker. They get the festival token, which is a reminder that at the start of Purple's next turn, they have to perform that festival scoring for all players, and then once that scoring is completed, Purple will proceed with their turn as normal. I'll talk about how the festival scoring happens in a moment. I just want to do this last Rejuvenate action, which is over here. Purple has 3 workers, so they have to discard down to 2, but they wanted to take that last worker from the village to force a festival to take place. So let's say they want to get rid of this green craftsman. Okay, that ends their turn. And now it's Blue's turn, and we're going to move Blue to Rejuvenate. Okay, when you take the Rejuvenate actions, all players are able to flip face up any number of their face down buildings or army cards, paying 1 corn each. However, the active player gets to flip one of their buildings or army cards for free, and they can pay a potato for every subsequent card instead of a corn. So the active player gets to flip one for free and pay a food in order to flip additional cards, again, be it buildings or army cards. And then each additional player can do the same thing, but they can only pay 1 corn. So I don't know if any other players have corn. Let me just, oh yeah, Red has plenty of corn, so does Purple. So Blue obviously could take a gold if they wanted to. We're going to have them do the Rejuvenate action instead. So we're going to move the High Priest. It is legal for them to move to the Rejuvenate space. And now they can flip 1 building or army card for free, and then after that, or they can just collect 1 gold. But after that, they are going to have to pay 1 food. They've got 2 face-down tiles or cards, so they're going to flip their production building for free. And now they have to pay 1 food to flip their army card, so they can use it again for a future conquest action. So they're going to pay, all they have is corn, so they're going to pay 1 corn to flip it. And now every other player in turn order gets to do the same thing, but they have to pay 1 corn in order to flip face up whatever it is they want to flip. So they're going to flip this building face up, and they're going to flip this army card face up. One costs 1 corn each. And now Purple gets to do the same thing. They've got 2 face down army cards, and they do have 2 corn, so they're going to flip both. And that's how Rejuvenate works. And you've seen Rejuvenate, this Rejuvenate icon on God cards. It also appears on some weaving tiles. Who was it that had, yeah, it was a Red that had that icon, and they actually had the match, and that allows them to perform one free Rejuvenate when they resolve their weaving matches. Blue has to finish their turn. Again, I'll just do a training. And now we end their turn, and then red performs their turn, and then once it comes back around to purple, who's holding the festival scoring token, that's when you first, before they take their turn, you trigger the festival scoring for all players, you resolve it completely, and then the active player proceeds with their turn. So let's talk about festival scoring right now. You already saw that that the player who activated the festival scores 1, 2, or 4 points. If it's the first, second, or third festival, then every player gets to perform a free merchant task, which is when you go through all your weaving tiles and reap the benefits of all the matches that you've generated. In the case of blue here, they would get 1 army card. They would get to draw 2 army cards and keep 1. Red would get 3 more points. They would get a rejuvenate, but they don't have anything to they could rejuvenate this army card, and then they'd get some 3 potatoes out of it. Purple would get 3 points out of it. That's the only match they have. So that's the first thing you do in the festival scoring. Then based on where you are on the temple track, you score the number of points to the right of your marker. So in this case, purple would score 4 points, and red and blue would score 1 point. Then for each one of the 4 conquest regions, the player who has the most markers gets 1 victory point for each worker that's in the casualties of war section. So because there's 1 worker currently in the, remember, every time you perform a conquest action, another worker gets added to the casualties of war. So for this, if I was doing a festival scoring now, blue would score 1 victory point because they have majority in this region. In this region, it's a tie, and you break ties by whoever has the marker to the farthest right. So in this case, purple would score a point. In this region, blue would score another point, and nobody would score a point down here because nobody has any markers in the 4th region currently. Next, every player has to pay 1 potato for every god card in their hand. So I did say there was a little bit of a penalty to be had if you started hoarding god cards. Having extra god cards in your hand may not necessarily be a good thing. You do have to pay 1 potato per god card in your hand during the festival scoring. For each potato that you can't pay, you have to lose 2 points. Next, if it was the 3rd festival, you'd just go to endgame scoring. But otherwise, obviously, the player holding the festival token returns the festival token. I mentioned that in a 2-player game, if it's the first festival, there are more spots in the middle terrace that possibly get workers placed on them for blocking purposes. Then every player, in order from lowest score to highest score, gets to draw god cards from the top of the deck. They don't choose from the offer. They just draw from the top of the deck. In a 3-player game, the player with the lowest score draws 2 cards from the top of the god card deck. The player with the next highest score draws 2, and the player with the most points draws 1. If in case of a tie, in terms of points, then the player who is closest to the active player, the player who had the festival token in their possession, that player is considered to have more points. If this were the way things were at this point for the festival scoring, blue would draw 2 cards, red would draw 2 cards, and purple would draw 1 card from the god card deck. If you were playing a 4-player game, the player with the lowest score draws 2, the player with the next lowest score card draws 2, and then the other 2 players draw 1. And then in a 2-player game, the 1 player with the lowest score draws 2, the player with for the highest score draws 1. And then finally, each player in turn order may take 3 god cards from their hand, up to 3, and redeem them for their benefits just like they did at the beginning of the game at the end of setup. All those discarded god cards are shuffled into the deck or just placed into a discard pile. All of the face-up buildings are then recycled to the bottom of the stack and new buildings are brought out. And then finally, it's the player who had the festival token takes their turn and play continues. Oh, you restock the village with as many workers as you possibly can up to the normal limit for the village. In this particular case, there happen to be plenty of workers in the bag, so we would restock the village with, 6 more workers. That's how festival scoring works. After that 3rd festival, you don't do any of the extra stuff. You just do the merchant scoring, and you do the temple track scoring, and you do the majority scoring for conquest regions. And then endgame scoring involves scoring for your tapestries. You get 0 points for having a tapestry consisting of 1 tile. You get 1 point for 2 tiles, then 3, then 6, then 10, then 15, then 21. Most you can get out of a tapestry with all 7 different weavings in it would be 21 points, and you score for each one of your separate tapestries. Any player who occupies one of these top 4 spaces would score 2, 6, 12, or 20 victory points. Anybody who has any face-up buildings, including ones that are passive, would score 2 points per face-up building. So in this case, blue would score 2 points for that building. Red would score 4 points for their 2 buildings. And purple doesn't have any. They wouldn't score any points for buildings. Next, you score a point for every god card in your hand. You score a point for every face-up army card in your player area. So in that case, blue wouldn't score any points. Red would score 1 point for 1 face-up army card. And purple would score 1 point for 1 face-up army card. You score 1 point per worker for any workers in your supply. And lastly, you score 1 point for any gold you have on hand, because gold's extra special. And the player with the most points wins. In case of a tie, the player who has the most resources in total wins among the tied players. And that's how you play Tawantinsuyu. I have pretty much explained everything. I hope you got some value out of this. Just as a reminder that when you are performing the secondary task that involves moving your high priest, you can move your high priest 1 or 2 spaces in a clockwise direction, and you don't have to perform the action. You can choose to take a gold instead, but then every other player gets to perform the lesser value of the action the way they normally would. You always share actions when you move your high priest, and you always potentially share when you do a task that involves purchasing weavings and you haven't purchased all 3 of the weavings. Remember, the first weaving you purchase is 1 corn, the next one is 2 corn. If you want the 3rd weaving tile, you have to pay 3 more corn for a total of 6. But if you don't buy in all of them and you leave some of them left over, any other player who has 3 corn in their possession can purchase one of those leftovers in turn order, starting with the player following you. And that's Tawantinsuyu. If you have any comments, if I made any mistakes, I hope I didn't, but if I did, or if I said anything that kind of sounded a little bit awry, please post a comment or let me know, and I'll make sure that's noted. Otherwise, thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.